The Lost Cosmonauts. The lens of my unskinned soul, opening to the void, is carelessly dissolved. Jalal ad-Din Muhammad Rumi, Divan-i-Samas, 649. For explorers of the dark. Apostles of Icarus. Apostles of Icarus, lost in last copies of documents offered to secret pyres. Sifting for heroes, we pan carbonized remains for golden flakes of ash. From the waxy white of faded snapshots, digitized and archived, stare the eyes of pride's resolve, preserved by a second capturing of light. The nameless fascinate the named, pharaohs erased for their follies, soldiers their graves unknown, many but of one monument. We haunt radio telescopes, ghosts to the stars we sieve for patterns to call voices, pitching our eulogy at would-be conquerors. The shield of the earth sears our steel wings as we fall home, flirting with fire. The Space Race. Engine, for Konstantin Eduardovich Tsiolkovsky. Grade schools refused a pupil, marred by scarlet fever, deafened by the virus, as if time snagged his ears and amplified their natural decay. Imposed silence framed childhood vistas of frozen skies. Rejection fostered an autodidact and numeric artist. His recompense, discovering a landmark equation raised from the mulch of his readings. Intense study revealed the key to heaven's maze, the mathematical passphrase for the stern doors of sprawling ballrooms we have gazed into since we put fire in reins. A sea of magma parts for Rodin's gates, knowledge twisting each self-imprisoned figure. We struggle against the air we breathe, an edge of caustic friction, amnion of flame, while crammed into the cones of crafts alleged to dethrone gravity. These structures tame explosions violent as a tyrant's purge, each craft sustained by its design, each frame shaming predecessors. The boy emerged a teacher, irony of ironies, this student of himself. His brightly merged imagination and constraint conceived of steering thrusters, multi-stage boosters, airlocks, and the rocket engine. Appease the Hyades and Pleiades, lest Zeus defend his kin when launching these golems, metallic guzzlers of rare fuels, liquid O2 and H2, like silos of chilled vodka. Toasts to the sage who split the beating organ of his youth before a cold altar in order to transmit his dreams beyond his name. If we permit, probes. Wayward voyagers cast out from our lush harbors glide over Titan. Particles litter their golden shells, pleas of soul infinitesimal. Gloved hands assembled these sterile machines with gentle diligence. Probes bathe in deep space to capture faint snapshots of ice caps made of wind. One generation monitors what another began, each waving like the parents of gleaming offsprings, embarking on dark odysseys. Capsules for Yuri Gagarin and Valentina Tereshkova. In your pre-flight portraits, your eyes are bleak as rogue planets, your body strapped to a cage welded to the steel palantir you will drive as far from everyone as one can go. The deaths of your comrades command your face, clamped in a muscular pose of stoicism so complete its opaque repression of emotion compresses your fear like the carbon of a diamond makes a mirror of itself, revealing the weight you must carry with you like a second suit as you breach the seal of Tartarus, strapped to a burning bomb, hoping the glitches that snatch lives will pass over you. The door of your blackened cannonball tattooed with red. Selected to gaze into the oubliette of space, you find a maze so vast its edges remain unseen. No trailing crumbs can trace trajectories should you veer off course and stumble upon the ghosts whose memories were burned away, but whose mobile graves may outlast the earth. Your eyes have aged beyond you, as if trying to reconcile some damage deep enough to creep to secret recesses, buried as carefully as warheads. What ferocity burns in those eyes, green as trinitite? Do they hide as if in waiting to attack, to lash fury upon the first to dare a glance? Even so, those eyes could liberate the damned, could boldly infiltrate abysmal gates, and with their unwinged gaze could spill warlight upon demonic denizens, demand to free each flaming corpse from the sinuous straps and vein-like wires laced to crackling seats, jockeys tangled in their melting exoskeletons, their faces fusing to the microphones we used to monitor their spherical vehicles, as they shattered our atmosphere in fugues of grinding fire. As the strength of gravity recedes, tears of awe collect beneath your eyes like sacks of dew. Friction caresses blushing capsules, as if to woo the metal to give up its structure, relent to the gaping rage of chaos you hurtle toward, drunken in this crusade to claim a plot of night. Station. Climb into a hive for humans, its modular corridors lined with ceramic to neutralize invading radiation. A new form of motion to frolic in. You are as weightless as breath. Bolted portholes give you pristine views of Earth, every horizon knit into a perfect arc of clouds that hover above deserts vibrant in barrenness, over a sprawl of forest, over grasslands stretching across fertile plains. Aboard, you become used to sleeping in a bag tied to the wall, a corpse-like vampiric creature, your body a pale frame. Dreaming machines and the amplified rhythms of your heart and lungs ail the otherwise sterile quiet. A white leviathan's entrails surround you with guts of wire, tools, insulated ducts. The most pitiless wraiths of hell would not dare haunt the vacant corridors of secret stations, orbits long decayed, left drifting after their designers destroyed themselves with suns summoned from deep below the ground. For the spirits of heroes guard, even in death, those spaces where they last stood vigil, took commands until unable to raise their armored limbs to obey sacred oaths. A lack of gravity will atrophy your bones, cause each muscle to thin and slacken. Let your lungs succumb to sloth, your blood dilute. You will spend hours exercising, but you will still weaken. Freedom from gravity delimits you. Can we survive if space will waste us all away, too quick for our bodies to adapt? How can we afford to burn our sole refuge when we have no means of escape? At the ISS station, we examine ways other forms of life adapt to zero-G. A space-born zinnia blooms, petals the frail flesh of hope. Offshoots. Eons pass. Post-human progeny flee from a charnel house star system. War and necessity reweave our skins. Hard-wired hatreds extirpated, we ascend. No enemies thirst for our demise. Our collectives have thrived, stationed on poisoned moons. We built cities under Europa's ice crust, the offspring of Atlantis. We scarcely resemble those who fantasized while they huddled at the anvils of resource wars that they would achieve the stars. Their forays were inane. Each world we terraform, offer to our offshoots, becomes a beacon, an outpost for life and bulwark against entropy. We took a cue from bacteria, viruses, prions, and fungal spores, each propagating with relentless diligence, building endurances based on conditions encountered in arsenic badlands, in pools of sulfuric acid, in caves the sun shunned for millennia. These little nightmares gnawing at our backbones would pale as enemies set against our own outmoded biology, its crude processes abandoned, but studied and archived, like out-of-date histories, laughable arguments crippled by time. On the margins of galaxies, violent environments bent on destroying us coax us to reforge our bonds. We are miners of gas giants, asteroid plunderers, ruthless adapters to shredding sands. 4 million years ago, Earth shook with fever and chills, as if infected by our ancestors' stubborn efforts to propagate. How can we repent? Composed of living language, we will inscribe ourselves upon the pages of this brutal universe. Our imperatives will endure as we transcend physical boundaries, upload ourselves to self-maintaining servers, the final nirvanas of consciousness. We have always yearned to shed our flesh. Voyage to Luna. Come in, Houston. Recite for us the voyage of heroes who sailed an ocean of vacuum as black as the pupils of Hades, in quest of the ashen shores guarded by Artemis. Charged with this pilgrimage, Aldrin and Collins and Armstrong each guided their craft past the edge of a scathing sky, deep into primeval night, hoping they might gain Luna's favor and thus spite Russian rivals by gracing her shores in a decade's time. Scouts braved the vacuum, enabling the launch of the Apollo spacecraft, the 11th ship to shoulder so volatile a name, for the long-dormant rage of a god can be jostled awake by the feeblest misstepping of mortals whose arrogance narrows their sight. The first ship claimed the lives of its crew in a sudden inferno that trapped them inside, Helios claiming overdue sacrifices owed to him for NASA's invocation of his Roman name. With the edge of the decade approaching, the shipbuilders forsook sleep, honed their arcane harnessing of the Titan's invisible forces, and Florida's Cape, rechristened for Kennedy the Betrayed, remained ablaze. Engines consuming fuel, silos like flagons of wine at Olympian banquets. Caffeine-driven technicians tweaked each design with geometry salvaged from ages dissolved by the acids of time, while moon goddesses watched from their pantheon, carved in the wall of the crater called Korolev, named for a Soviet engineer jailed in the terror of Yezhov. His life drained by slavery, Korolev's death gave advantage to Armstrong's crew. Watching the mortals are Phoebe the Titan, grandmother of Artemis, moon dust her war paint, essential for sacrosanct rites to derail fate, and Selene, daughter of Titans Hyperion and Thea, sister of Helios, who led her lover Endymion into unceasing sleep at Latmos. Artemis also, the mistress of animals, daughter of Demeter, huntress and stalwart protector, her snares full of comets, her traps latched to alien beasts that must satisfy all the hungers of a goddess of night. Nearby, Neaera, nymph of newborn moons and mother of Thasula, who traces designs in moon dust in front of the Pantheon, fingers precise as the pulses of water that mortals now use to cut steel. Akaloi, pain cleanser, who ruminates in her chamber of moon rock that overlooks Korolev, scrying at mortals whose trials have yet to be settled, whose actions will ripple for better or worse in the ballads and tapestries capturing them. Hecate, hunter of dungeons, the bearer of torches, the holder of keys, the necromancer, witchcraft her mother tongue, poisons and herbal cures her secrets, specters her collective. Persei and Pandia, who bound down windless halls, newness and brightness, the moon's glow and cycle, their hair pluming outward as viscous as reeds in a honey-thick sea, their skin sugared with ice crystals. Lo, the 8th mission of Helios approaches. Selene and her Roman name labeled documents, wiring, panels, and newspapers, capsules and badges, an adjective hopping the lips of the mortals, a chanting not heard for millennia. Luna to lunar to moon, as if she were the sole goddess warding night. Stirred by the sight of Apollo 8, each of the matriarchs drift to the Pantheon's innermost chamber, where silvery thrones cast in silicone sheathe their luminescent skin, each cold chair inlaid with magnetic murals depicting astral wars fought in mortal lore. Phoebe, the wisest one, muses to her sisters. Mortals are dreamers of tragic absurdities, destined to self-obsessed paths, their souls blighted with yearning and apathy. We must extinguish this campaign of blasphemy, one bound to disgrace a once grateful people, reverent of goddesses and gods alike. We once guided the mortals, now they seek to conquer us. I'll not forgive them this. They are explorers, not arrogant conquerors, says Phoebe's niece, Selene. Violence is not their sole aptitude. Credit them for their pursuit of truth. They pursue truth as a hunter does prey, adds Artemis. She then plucks a silver feather from the hawk on her shoulder, the gleaming titanium beast wincing. As if to simply ensnare such an animal teaches the hunter to sniff out its soul. The huntress flicks the feather, and Hecate glides from her throne, catching the glimmering trinket mid-spin. She twirls the treasure before her charcoal lips, wearing a long smile. She blows on the feather, transforming it into that of a mortal hawk, and sliding it into her hair. She addresses the room.
Who are we to judge the hubris of the mortals? They punish themselves most effectively in their slow blunderings.
Artemis sighs at Hecate's objection. Mortals lack patience, cannot track truth without killing it, and they cannot learn, even from their worst errors. Neaira adds her voice.
Humans are fragile beings, their fears all but infinite. Though they may blunder, their hearts are so soft. It is wondrous any have done what these voyagers and their armorers have. Are we so callous we'll damn them for bravery? Are we so weak we'll be slaves to our spite? I say let them land. It will inspire them more than they know it will.
Achelous remains silent, her auburn eyes reading the mortals, their angst hidden from her kin. Hecate, now chuckling, sifts through her hair for the feather, but pulls out a stylus and studies the instrument. She does not speak of this. Perse and Pandia then muse in unison.
Who cares what we do? Our energy's better spent elsehow. Our time better given to dancing than caring for miscreant mortals. Or should we say humans, as Neaira does, who forsakes our language in favor of blasphemy,
Perse and Pandia snicker while Artemis raises her hand, and the hawk on her shoulder opens its beak, loosing an eerie decree on the vacuum. Artemis stands, grasping her bow, and fires an arrow at the ceiling. Its tip clips the stone of the lunar room, sending the arrow's head into the plinth at the chamber's core. Artemis glowers at Perse and Pandia, now silent.
Focus. The 8th ship approaches us.
Artemis sheaths her bow, reclines, and clothes her brow with her hand. She then asks Selene to retrieve the arrow now buried in the chamber's plinth. Selene drifts out to fetch the projectile. As she does, Achelous utters scripture, a quote of a quote from the crew of Apollo 8, spoken above the moon.
Darkness was upon the face of the deep.
Hearing this, the council dissolves. Each leaves the chamber to gaze at the orbiting mortals praying to them. Borman and Lovell and Anders, each calling for blessings for all mortals. Phoebe points out that they offer no sacrifice. Artemis shrugs at the vessel and calls the ship crude. Selene drifts toward the capsule, invisible. Once inside, she peers through the window's narrow view before approaching the mortal men. Monk-like in vigil, they maintain their vessel, preventing leaks, adjusting oars, recording wave and weather, all while they commune with kin. They navigate Luna's foreboding horizon, beseeching her with verse. Perse and Pandia giggle.
They ask for blessings for all mortals living, yet brandish no sacrifice. Laughable.
Achelous retorts,
Journeying here is their sacrifice.
They will continue, and if on their 11th voyage they moor their craft gracefully, I'll grant the mortals my blessing. At this, Phoebe scowls, her eyes flaming white, and vows never to let any mortal set foot on such hallowed ground and escape back to earth. Their armored corpses will ornament our halls. Apollo 10 ferried out Stafford, Cernan, and Young above Korolev, past the dark Pantheon, past Selene's bedchamber, past Hecate's laboratory, past the grasping gaze cast by the beasts Artemis keeps beneath her room. When the 11th ship left the earth, The huntress begrudgingly gave respect, though her leathery soul offered Armstrong's crew no more pity than animals strayed from their den. Each goddess watches the 11th craft descend, a construct dependent as much on fortune as on calculation. The ship runs aground in the Sea of Tranquility, named for its favorable waters of dust. Inside, Aldrin sips wine from a chalice, his gesture perplexing the goddesses.
Does he mistake us for Dionysus's mad retinue?
Asks Selene.
No, this rite represents reverence for sacrifice,
answers Achelous.
Mortals give sacrifice to the gods. The reverse is mere blasphemy,
spits Phoebe. When the hatch opens, the captain cannot escape, laden with layers of armor. Artemis grimaces at this spectacle of birth. Selene darts to the lander, placing her hands on the captain's air satchel. Armstrong's heart gallops. He struggles to descend the vessel's ladder. Selene shoves his satchel, freeing him. He climbs down to find gardens of feldspar and andesite, minerals bloomed over epochs, and grasses of ashen dust tended by meteorites. Hours later, Phoebe smirks as the mortal men pilfer from this garden.
They come to rob and defame us, as I surmised. When they attempt to leave, their oars will snap. They will die for this blasphemy.
Phoebe returns to the Pantheon with her kin, all except Hecate, who floats to the lander to find the two mortals staring at a broken switch. Hecate retrieves her pen, kisses it, and slips the tool into Aldrin's hand. Aldrin, his gaze torn away from his doom, holds the instrument out and turns, facing Hecate. "You think that'll work?" asks the captain, pointing at the pen. Aldrin turns, blinking. He nods and then slides the pen into the ship's panel. Ignition commences. Upward the heroes fly, bound for their blue homeland. The Kardashev scale. Globus Cassus for Christian Waldvogel. Harvester ants transform their sand dunes, legions locked in automated frenzies. Streams of drones connect for shared imperatives, patrol their hoarded stocks, protect languid queens that necessity elects. Clamped in the vice of their design, these eager slaves deliver larvae to the vaults they carve, dissect the clay that blocks expansion of their sprawling maze. Bewitched by instinct's chemical refrains, they race to brace storerooms and passageways for the great rains. Humans enact a plan to increase real estate. 4 satellites grow toward the Earth. These progeny of Babel reach halfway to Luna's doleful face with ductile needles of silicon, citadels for Terra's oeuvre, soaring arcs and archives, knit to house and to preserve, while we construct a shell nourished by tendrils clad in graphene lattices that siphon magma from our overburdened globe into a vacuum-porous scaffold in orbit. Centuries of construction change the dawn we share, viewed through transparent sectors of silica glass that invite sunlight to ideal plains and shores, to empty seas conceived by architects to grasp the fleeting hydrosphere of Terra, her mantle coaxed away by infernal transfusion. At last, we find the final gift of matter Earth will grant, the cradle sacrificed to shape its future urn, presents its hoarded core of iron for transplant to complete an exo-Earth as wide as Saturn, a bubble that captures Terra's vital weather, the relentless atmosphere that hovers, clots, and churns above wildlife roaming vast verdant reserves and land masses conserved as artifacts, displayed terrains to which pensive adventurers sojourn from cities, the crowns of tailored horizons, made to glean glimpses of soul, until we build his cage. Dyson Sphere, for Olaf Stapledon and Freeman Dyson. Entropy marks all empires with latent doom, approaching like an unseen horde of fungal spores to envelop all matter in its creeping plume. Scholars in halls carved from alien bedrock hoard history's nectars in a hive of texts, for storms of war must not reset our hourglass before we grow into a strain of life that stalks the rims of caustic seas, caretakers of bioarchives riding zip lines of spider silk over chasms of extinction. How strange must we become to thrive in space, to brace our anthills against astral rains? When we have tamed our meager star, will we still sigh at the glow of engines moving homeward, a din muted by the dark that promises familiar hearths lie just ahead? Or will our grim indifference win over our empathy, trampled under the march of passing generations? Will our sentience evanesce like pre-dawn mist above a vacant park? The alms of our sun no longer meet the needs of our machines, whose children we release to spin a web to trap the star by which we were conceived. Escher rendered a construct of concentric rings rotating around a star, yet fixed like a mask of machines, to snatch flighty photons and their kin. Shadow-thin sheets of carbon repeat their task of self-replication, swarming to form a shroud around Sol, so the dawn will be distilled at last. The veil thickens, caging Sol, a dragon cowed by carbon spells. His muzzled flames enrich the land we craft inside his prison egg, a brief abode, since dragons' bellies swell with age, increase their span, the weaker their inner fires become. But far from Sol, humanity maintains its long-term plan to populate the Milky Way, taming its stars, and huddle near these lights in vaulting abattoirs. Galactic Engineering, for Nikolai Kardashev and Peter Watts. Habitats forged from asteroid-salvaged ingots whirl like desiccated spores, each mass of matter free to drift in windless depths, outgrown by its builders. Beings that grow like crystals from incessant seeds and travel in amorphous hives, gorging matter from planets, stars, and nebulae, their former deeds faded from memory. Their ancestors' chatter survives, archived as quantum bits and genetic ciphers embedded in living machines. A tar secreted by these flower-shaped monsters like sweat contains the secrets they received when they broke through the barrier of self-awareness, fled the net of sentience, a dead-end mutation, a slough, that like La Brea's pits ensnares its prey with fear's endearing plea for flight and doubt's insistent frown. Freed from these glue traps for inferior species, the builders flourish in soulless lucidity. Gamble adaptive drones in ploys without surcease, analyze and smite their rivals who grow livid when they fail to bargain with demons for peace. But the builders, met with extinction, would not give out sentiment for monuments or some secret goodbye embedded in a viral rose. Anguished by his fate, did Orpheus ask Hades or plead for relief from sorrow, ponder relinquishing all awareness of himself, all capacity to feel? We have heard the murmur of this wish near the radial hells of black holes, accretion disks whipping the runoff of malevolent suns into flaming scimitars that guard creation's knowledge, information that when lost within, none can retrieve, unless they charm their way beyond the singularity, a point clothed in warped light. Once this rift in physics riddled the builders, but free of sentience's noise, their lyres were exact in song and led them on. The builders used to flee from asteroids, lithic slag that worried would act as fleets of warheads, eager to annihilate their meager populations. Prospective impacts brought fear, stark as a stalking leopard's eyes. But fates of mass death faded in the wake of more refined tools. Their spears gave way to quantum logic gates that thought for them, processing the unkind trajectories of errant slag, and running scans of hypergiant stars that at their grand demise must incarnate their bitter rage in spectral bands so tightly packed these gamma utterances sweep galaxies away like murals of sacred sand. But even these catastrophes of light and heat the builders met with mirrored shields. They enclosed outposts near stars prone to violent outbursts, greeted each Medusa with its visage, each flaring boast of rays from each dragon with coats of mithril rings. Yet these galactic engineers are now, at most, an echo of their ancestors, whose dreams and myths, all glib, were figments of their flaws, mutations, cloyed with fragrant words of hope by literary smiths. On the shores of the Eridana's supervoid, a well of eldritch depth all sentient life abhors, our mindless children sip dark energy, deploy their arts to probe dimensions beyond senses' doors, the unexplored countries they toil blindly toward. Wax Wings. Crucible, for Valentin Vasilyevich Bondarenko. The glazed saline lights of tears glint as the sea burns with mirrored stars, fires amid sunken lies, the ghosts of dead sparks. An airbrushed photograph sparks interest in hidden deaths, the shattered lights of vacant rooms, filaments charred by fire's ambition lit, unlike those lightning burns when forests crave renewal. Glowing tiers of cinder sprinkle blackened slag that lies at hushed crash sites. Careful lies conceal the horrors bred by stray sparks in an oxygen-rich chamber. Hell tears through dimensional barriers and lights a cosmonaut. By Hades' spite he burns with flowing blossoms of infernal fires, gouging out his nerves. Pain fires through dendrites until endorphins tell lies to his mind, blackened skin denied, his burns fade amid innate saintly guilt that sparks his final words, an admission when lights highlight his devastation. Panicked tears choke through his rescuers. Tears lacing his flesh glow with blood bright as fires in star-edged badges, blazing like the lights under which somber censors weave state lies thick enough to obscure the distant sparks of covert launches hinged on midnight burns from foundry-born rockets. Burns appear on cheeks nettled by restless tears of lasting loss. A father, felled by sparks born of his careless act, flinging the fire's catalyst toward his hot plate. No lies may disgrace this monument. By the lights that grace these frail pages, lights imitating the star whose rising burns away the night, these words mark one who lies interred in engrams, freed from fitful tears by reverent minds, spirit distilled. The fires of synaptic snapshots hold his soul. Sparks burst. Our dendrites' lights fix tears in archived tomes. Burns edge a photo fires met. The true self lies steeped in seas of sparks. Eye of Dawn, for the crew of Apollo 1. Distressed at the prospect of travel in a vessel outfitted with an excess of flammable materials, 3 astronauts mirror their palms in sarcastic prayer before a model of their capsule, an ivory pyramid resembling the marble lacquered marker of Khufu's tomb. This pharaoh's wizard, Jedi, designed his god-king's mausoleum to guide its principal occupant, who sought in life the documents of Thoth, god of knowledge, to the netherworld, where such secrets reside. Diagonal shafts bisect cyclopean blocks of limestone, inviting heaven's eyes to embalm sealed chambers in celestial light, and granting ghosts, lost amid their troves of treasures, measured paths to meet their judgment. Captured in monochrome atop a black table, the Apollo capsule model hovers, while the crew's bowed heads and angled hands suggest that each man might break into a bow before the snowy icon. The crew, immersed in their chamber of pure oxygen, could not see the liquid glycol coolant beneath their feet react with silver-plated wires to release electric arcs. In minutes, solder joints melted. Spacesuits fused to molten nylon. Investigators later found a handprint etched in ash on the inside of the hatch. In the sterile test facility, technicians rushed past oxygen canisters stacked like canoptic jars. The capsule window glowing like the eye of Horus drawn wide. Countdown for Vladimir Mikhailovich Komarov and Valentina Yakovlevna. Flight reduced his body to a grimace of charcoal. His beloved's faintest touch would have dismantled his crust of skin. He kept faith in his parachute, trusted a membrane designed to strain against hellish speeds. But his tangled bundle of fabric refused him. No radios could sieve his dying calls from the muting sheath of air that his capsule ionized. His undiluted descent ended in a crash like the hammer blow of a gavel held in the wooden fist of a grisly judge. This verdict emptied his beloved's bed, transformed her haven into a foreign landscape. After his landing, she dove into the hush of Luna's placid oceans, each a colossal urn for lost explorers. At the Kremlin wall, his military knell rang, before glinting officials entombed his remains under gray stone. 3 crewmates, spared by their comrades' demise, felt their bravery flicker like a wind-blown flame. The sun undoes all wax, the bees' sacred scaffolding, if we misuse it in hubris. What fields of ash must we sow amidst the arc of stars in which we spin, our cabin, corroded by rabid wars, haunted by martyrs, their deeds discarded? We deny that each of us must face one final flight. Ezekiel 37:9 for the crew of Soyuz 11. Dobrovolsky, Patsayev, and Volkov docked at Salyut 1, the first humans to moor a craft in orbit. With their last transmission, the crew encouraged their comrades on Earth to anticipate toasts of hearty liquors to herald their homecoming, and bid them gather sacred libations, complete with an accompanying feast, a supper for those who passed over all homes at unspeakable heights. The trio lacked spacesuits, a measure their superiors agreed upon to save weight, space, and time during descent. As they fell, a premature decompression left the crew prepared for their embalmers. The capsule they shared, once airless, acted as their sepulchre before it bore their bodies home, all else according to design. How many ships have failed to shield their crews from storms that compromised compartments, or from galling holes that robbed each deck of breathable air? How many ghostly galleons have drifted home, barges for the salt-crusted corpses of starved crews? How many oars have snapped? The Soyuz crew arrived in ghoulish repose, as if asleep, their doll-like faces masks of false tranquility, framed by thin trails of blood. If they had found the culprit valve in time, a single finger placed over the leak would have allowed all 3 to leave the capsule, to emerge after inhabiting death's yawning maw for 3 long weeks, to shed their white shrouds like Lazarus and live on as embodied icons of the miracle of space flight. But alas, at the landing site, medical personnel repeat their futile ritual of CPR, their subjects only minutes dead. Nearby, stalks of grass, stiff as antennae, receive a prophetic plea. Come forth, 4 winds, and breathe upon these slain, that they may live. Fragment for the crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger. Years later, on a Brevard County beach, a mother gently shakes her daughter's hand, dislodging a scrap of metal from the child's grip. Wary of potential infections, the mother checks her daughter's palm and, finding no mark, returns the child to the family umbrella. Lying near a styrofoam cooler, the child reflects on the texture of her artifact, its surface smeared with the greasy kiss of incessant heat, hallmark of car parts and barbecues. The soft gunshot of the pop can that Dad hands out, and the stinging cold of its aluminum shell, brings to mind the shard's gnarled edge, and what force shored the fragment from its greater whole. The dark jewel stood out in the sand, like a tree's last fallen leaf, its surface browned and curled as if decayed. The pop and the shade fail to lessen the loss of her treasure, so near to its finding. The child pouts, but years later remembers only sand crabs skittering over powdered glass. Dark Mirrors, for the crew of the Space Shuttle Columbia. The Space Mirror Memorial has room for 90 names on its wall of black marble tiles, every name cut out completely through its tile, allowing light to filter through a backing of translucent acrylic to illuminate the names of the dead. The wall once tracked Apollo's arc and rotated to keep its letters lit, but when the mechanism failed, no repair was made, in favor of a more economical way of providing light. Now, legions of artificial suns burn behind this daunting monument day and night. An arc of white fence encircles the towering grid of gold and obsidian, gracefully barring all visitors from touching the pristine wall. Names adorn 24 tiles on the looming wall. 7 were cut when a piece of foam broke free, gashing Columbia's wing. Well aware of her molting, none expected a disaster, and so ignoring the phenomenon became the norm. How many more children, enraptured by their flight, must fall before Athena gives their grieving parents wings? Daedalus, ever bereaved yet guiltless for the warning that he gave. A new Icaria lies far across the sea from Greece, where all the craftsmen of NASA could not kill contingency. Rename the land for these fallen, each shore a museum of unseen debris, each wave whispering unheard eulogies. Causality for all apostles of Icarus. Because defects in electrical systems caused apogee problems. Because a goose smashed through the cockpit, plexiglass clogging the engine. Because the weather disagreed with their intent to test metal wings. Because of a grievous mechanical failure in the aileron. Because parachutes may refuse to open like stubborn buds in spring. Because the pilot veered to avoid tearing through a weather balloon. Because the water of the Black Sea invaded the cosmonauts' lungs. Because the feathered re-entry system deployed prematurely. Red Phantoms for the Lost Cosmonauts. May and November 1960. SOS signals trickle through the chrome mesh of scavenged microphones. February 1961. Suffocating gulps ride air that their speakers' taxed lungs can't access. April 1961. One spacecraft returns its pilot to Earth, the first, before Gagarin. May 1961. A cosmonaut spins, circling the drain of space, his comrades silent. October 1961. One craft glances off the atmosphere, its pilot a gift to the deep. November 1962. Instruments tremble in another ship that fails to rejoin the Earth. November 1963. A spacecraft consumes its pilot, who dies reading the heat of her tomb. April 1964. At friction's mercy, a ship dissolves, its pilot, a snowflake in spring. Celestial Bodies, for Diane Ackerman. Mars, the bringer of war. Lone rovers thresh these empty continents and seas, sand-blasted basalt basins stained with ancient rust. The blue sun staring through these raving skies laments an atmosphere long banished by a stagnant core. Pyroxene pikes and glaives of hazy glass protrude from shallow valleys of volcanic olivine. Across andesite and hematite expanses, iron oxide gales enrobe ridges of feldspar plagioclases in erosive embraces. Lurid ballets of wind and grit on tainted stages grind valorous ballads to violent halts, silence the odes of jovial halls, crescendos shattered by the tremors of advancing troops, the livid grains whose gales clash on plains of battered silicates. Each horde equipped with relics, weapons coaxed from forges long gone cold, fashioned from molten streams of distilled tectosilicates, tempered and honed under unexplained auroras, crystals twinning when these spectral legions reach collision, rivulets of their souls coagulate in bladed waves that wash across the face of Acheron Fosse. The massacre's geology retains, confess in chronicles of rock, their fossilized bodies, folded in wastelands pockmarked by astral buckshot. At the summit of Olympus Mons, son of Zeus, you clasp the arms of a throne constructed from limbs of disassembled probes. Legions of damned below poultice your loss of Venus with their agony. Venus, the bringer of peace. Vulcan's eager lips hammer fissures into these lobate lands, spawn flat-topped Phara and arachnoid fractures, features concealed by an insular haze of carbon dioxide. Carrara-white clouds clothe roiling heavens in corrosive vapors that could fast dissolve the flesh of falling astronauts, or could erase like earthly rain the sprawling glyphs of chalk from sidewalks where a child spelt her dreams. In spindrift gulfs, sulfuric acid rains baptize angelic choirs, whose tortured cries echo across calderas gouged from realms of sterilizing heat, each open sore a doorway to the forge of hell. No folding of amino acids may profane this virginal surface, may invade this veneer of alabaster smog, may spill dark names upon this cast of sacred plaster, clotted over bone. The bomb that graced these desertscapes has vaporized, leaving an atmosphere so dense that meteors create no craters, lingering to contemplate fatal caresses of assimilative flesh. Photodissociated oceans expose beds of fossils crushed to dust and sublimated in volcanic volleys, ghostly imprints lost. Our probes, like Aeneas, unable to embrace their shades. In ancient Rome, maidens revere love's avatar with mint and rushes. Myrtle-crowned generals cleanse blood guilt, speak Venus Victrix, and unwittingly invoke the venenum of Aphrodite's wrath. Mercury, the winged messenger. The bravest mote to girdle old Apollo, this courier of souls half scalded by eccentric orbit, dashes to snatch divine communiques, rushes to catch nymphs in spare moments, with stolen nets, godly mischief unchecked, retreats eclectic into a cryogenic night, alternate face too cold to crack. Regoliths block sublimation of scattered sheets of frozen gases. Moon-like skin stretches between the fractures, crisscrossing the crust of this winged musket ball. Jupiter, the bringer of jollity. Anticyclonic vortices enrobe a mantle of metallic hydrogen in crystallized ammonia clouds, the hosts of helium and neon rain. Lightning, 1,000 times the strength of earthly strikes, intrudes beneath blue aurorae that grace each pole with flitting sprites of liquid sky, the consorts of the eagle's aerial reign. Amalthea's gossamer ring, a gown of dust beyond the halo of her king, suspends a senate of abyssal moons, a flock fit for imperial auguring. Caramel marble molds a swirling eye, whose laws the fetial priest must valorize. Saturn, the bringer of old age. The rings of the city of Dis exist, 1.4 billion kilometers away. Through treeless woods we set our craft adrift. The orb's north pole, a hexagonal rift, a door to Babel's vaulting library. In sleep, the reaping scythe of dream is swift. The southern pole, a pit of shredding mist, a vortex of chthonic revelry. Through treeless woods we set our craft adrift. On shepherd moons, ichors of Tholen shift, assembling demons hell could not allay. In sleep, the reaping scythe of dream is swift. Amorphous carbon litters moonlets kissed by frost in each concentric ice ballet. Through treeless woods we set our craft adrift. The severed wings of Cupid make a gift for Lua Saturni, a chic entree. In sleep, the reaping scythe of dream is swift. Through treeless woods we set our craft adrift. Uranus the magician. Rheumatic sun, again unearthing a music, a gam in chateau ruins. A gunman heuristic, a huntsman auric, I age in aim, harangue cuts in a much gaunt ear, is a tune I am crushing, a name uncaught, is air at a churning. I amuse amateurish cueing, an inhumane act, I sugar sumac in a naughtier uranium as teaching. Neptune, the mystic. Ice master's blind eye, azure polished cataract, and Kuiper's ward. A colloquium of ocean deities soak beside this cold sphere. Naiad the closest boasts intimacy, yet strays toward her roach limit. Second, Thalassa, crustacean mother of love, mermaid matriarch. Desponia, third, daughter of equine mischief, queen of mysteries. Fourth, Galatea, animated marble maid, the sculptor's android. Larissa the fifth, a hydra-bearing nymph, heavily cratered. The sixth satellite, S2004N1, dark as fresh asphalt. Seventh, Proteus, lion, leopard, serpent, pig, held by Menelaus. Triton, the eighth orb, horn-bearing mermaid herald, cryovolcanic. The ninth, Nereid, like Diana's nymph Opus, slayer of Aarons. Halimede the tenth, Aegean spirit, storm bomb, crowned with red coral. The 11th, Sao, anti-siren, rescuer of sea-damned sailors. Laomedia, the 12th, a trident bearer, draped in silk and gold. Samanthe, 13th, partner of Proteus, named Sand of the Seashore. Neso, most distant, most inclined, most retrograde, a scream cast in ink. Orbital debris. In event of moon disaster, fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace. These brave men, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, know that there is no hope for their recovery. But they also know that there is hope for mankind in their sacrifice. These two men are laying down their lives in mankind's most noble goal, the search for truth and understanding. They will be mourned by their families and friends. They will be mourned by their nation. They will be mourned by the people of the world. They will be mourned by a Mother Earth that dared send two of her sons into the unknown. In their exploration, they stirred the people of the world to feel as one. In their sacrifice, they bind more tightly the brotherhood of man. In ancient days, men looked to the stars and saw their heroes in the constellations. In modern times, we do much the same. But our heroes are epic men of flesh and blood. In the Shadow of the Moon, for Buzz Aldrin. I was open-minded in anticipation, watching the Earth grow smaller, the moon grow larger. But all of us were totally surprised when the larger moon eclipsed the sun. We were in the shadow of the moon. Satisfactory photographs, unfortunately, were not produced. The black sky was different on the surface of the moon from Earth. The surrounding light is visible when looking at the night sky, but on the surface of the moon, the sun's light gave a pronounced velvet-like sheen, such that no stars were visible. The ambient light enabled stars to be seen through the telescope, but not through the visor cover on the eye. Last words. Prepare cognac and sausage to go with the moonshine. See you tomorrow. Roger, Uh-oh. Get us out. It was my fault. No one else is to blame. Beyond the infinite. Pale blue dot for Neil Armstrong. They waved until their hands fell to their sides, mild fatigue in wrists at rest, in preparation to enact ritual motions on the craft's precision instruments, each interface inspected by meticulous technicians, all too cognizant of conflagration, racked by the chronicled costs of unchecked flaws. Screens wiped clean each night manifest numeric narratives. Data projections coalesce. Harmonies of half-concealed sighs invade control rooms. Nemo's leagues recede into a jest, crammed into seconds as ascent melds craft and blast into a molten streak. Events are witness-forged. Soaked with clinging wisps of wind, they left the Zephyrus crest whose lingering protects the sprawling offshoots of an ancient spore, vast droves of colonies in ceaseless conflict. Life saturates itself, and so, detached, a single distant glimpse envelops and arrests a multitude possessed by errant dreams. Mirror-induced paralysis. Clinging mites mingle and scheme on the battered crust of a molten globe, lodged in the unknown's numbing umbra, like a chalk outcrop atop the shores of Dover. As wine-dark brine pummels their porous refuge, they should shiver like an animal, having isolated itself at instinct's final call, to be so near to nothing. The daredevil flights of the few lure them to a roaring edge where, eyeless as Gloucester, they ache for gravity's deliverance. Astral Vagabond, for Mohammed Faris. Expatriates of a war-torn state flee to nearby borders, families in tow. A neo-exodus. Each one compelled over some inner brink, sickened and laced with terror and adrenaline. Homeland a fallen dream. For you, it was pilots you trained, ordered to strike dissenters from above, isolated and reprogrammed to purge any hesitation. You failed to escape 3 times, surveilled thoroughly, too useful to lose. So you ventured out on foot, one of the few who crashed through the ceiling of the sky, now carrying your future on your back, on a demented family hike into permanent hiding. What secret trails were you forced to take? What grizzled contacts led your loved ones through the underground, each numb with sleeplessness, expecting familiar hands to clasp your shoulders, haul you backwards as if you were a disobedient child, scold you and put you back to work? The height of your honor was a co-Soviet flight to Mir, where your comrades proclaimed you hero, member of the Order of Lenin. Now proclaimed a traitor, ripped from history, you see your national accolades dissolve. You were trained to endure the risks of ascent into space, but nothing could steel you for the leap from general to refugee. Even now, you beseech your students of the skies to relinquish their ranks and medals, emblems of modern massacres, the badges of the death of exploration, of an age where we give up the stars, throw up our hands, and bow to grinning despots who convince us we must fight our neighbors to survive. Each new excuse for conflict forges new divides, passed on like strands of viral genes inherited with bloody infamy. In myth, our heroes were our teachers. In philosophy, our teachers' heroes. Reason and passion remain starved for the same balm of hope with which we strive to reach our rough-built destiny to rise. Space Poem Chain for Koichi Wakata. Floating before my eyes in primordial blackness, this blue, watery world gave me life. Thank you, beloved. You are our home. Tomorrow I am off again into blue, unexplored worlds. I will crack them open for the dreams they hold. Life obeys geometry, fan blackmail in red prisons. How dwelt subliterary Eve, elf magi, thou yank bold Eve? Yea, our moor hue, to worm or foaming ion of fiat. Exuded probes lull worn ink, collect a whimper of odes. Her myth held art. Antiverse Palindrome for Mikhail Pulkov. Spacecraft devouring space, accelerating time, warping darkness. The tempered supermassive singularity the burgeoning engines wing them to, distant Earth, departed and impassive, looms ahead. Here we are, blares intercom after intercom. Captain stoic and ship bolstered, last out and over shadows without form. Past spacecraft lost or wrecked, crews kindred in spirits, silenced both captain and ship. This recollection surpassed description. The portal that explorers and thinkers all sought, has it destroyed all travelers? Binding, infiltrating light, dim yet inviting, the rift beckoning the spacecraft, antimatter churning. The black, glowing veil, the closing frontier, the antiverse mirror, their reflection. Trembling and mumbling, their captain, now die we may. He and crew enter, time reversing, untethering, modulating minutes and seconds like putty. Navigator sees navigator. Twins speaking. Reflections, we are... Always still, still and singing. Singing and still, still always. Are we reflections? Speaking twins. Navigator sees navigator. Putty-like seconds and minutes modulating, untethering, reversing time. Enter crew and he. May we die now? Captain, their mumbling and trembling reflection. Their mirror antiverse, the frontier closing, the veil glowing black, the churning antimatter spacecraft, the beckoning rift, the inviting yet dim light infiltrating, binding travelers, all destroyed. It has sought all thinkers and explorers, that portal. The description surpassed recollection. This ship and captain, both silenced spirits and kindred, crews wrecked or lost, spacecraft past form without shadows. Over and out. Last bolstered ship and stoic captain. Intercom after intercom blares. Are we here? Ahead looms impassive and departed Earth, distant to them, wing engines burgeoning. The singularity supermassive, tempered the darkness, warping time, accelerating space, devouring spacecraft. The passage lies here, for Gwendolyn McEwen. The passage lies here, written in the lattice of iron knives that hides behind the blackened skin of a meteor fragment submerged in the dust of Lacus Somniorum. The passage lies here, scrawled on the rims of lunar impact rings we read as startled eyes and mouths agape in a choir of screams. The passage lies here, emblazoned on capsules haunted by vacant spacesuits, sealed mausoleums diving on spiraling routes through seamless black. The passage lies here, latched to the comets that score our probes, fastened to the flares that tear themselves from soul like strips of rebellious flesh. The passage lies here, veiled by the plumes of steam erupting from the pool beneath Saturn V in the infernal echo of her maw. The passage lies here, disguised as a glint of iridium on the polarized glass of a pair of aviators stored in a war museum. The passage lies here, in the footnotes of a virus, straddling the copper strands etched on the motherboards of the networked computers assembled like clay soldiers in the data centers of the NSA. The passage lies here, on the flag and family photo left at the Apollo landing site, erased by the gaze of the sun. Per aspera ad astra, for Christian Book. What happens to a species of explorers that have mapped their planet and set foot upon its moon when these thresholds of successful conquest threaten to obliterate them? We have charted mountain peaks severe enough to thicken our blood for lack of oxygen, in order to capture pictures of ardent cloudscapes, Olympian vistas idealized in the surviving frescoes of Pompeii. We have sent machines on suicidal campaigns to volcanic vents that marinate their crustacean occupants in a miasma of sulfurous vapors. We have drilled boreholes into the depths of Siberian glaciers in order to retrieve ancient bacteria. We have injected ourselves with untested cocktails of such motes, resurrected from their deathless slumber, but have gained no immortality from their presence in our blood. We have read the ongoing eulogy of the universe through the glass eyes of our satellites. We have clattered in cones atop exploding spires into the vacuum we must always occupy, sacrificing the mystic innocence of our cosmic myths in exchange for sacks of moon rocks and shovelfuls of lunar dust. We have sent emissaries to puncture the dark, laden with summaries of our futility. How many have spread their artificial wings, only to reel, fire-torn from their orbital thrones, or to careen on strayed trajectories into deep space? Was the first probe we hurled beyond the pull of our star the spherical coffin of a cosmonaut whose existence we erased for the sake of a race? If so, this sample of our mortality, this soul cast on an odyssey alone, like a lost kite hypnotized by wind, is the ultimate testament to our species. Life, bereft of space, suffocates itself, like the foliage that borders the jungled rivers that vent sweltering velds, dense tendrils writhing to escape themselves, to steal sips of light from their neighbors. We have rebelled against the borders of our maps, which trap us with completeness, which encourage us to stagnate, which divert us from our purpose. We have seen fireflies fade in and out, the shared meter of their persistent beacons broken only by the dawn. Our mothers have knelt before stark walls of brick adorned with portraits of their lost sons. Our officials have restrained these mourners in their woeful praying, as if such acts could exorcise the grief possessing them. Our capsules have come home, only to land off course, to snap through dark woods where emaciated wolves surround the cosmonauts trapped inside and circle as night descends. These stranded voyagers have awaited the dawn, shivering as they never did in space. A test pilot emerged from his personal inferno, leaving his skin, his lips, his eyes behind, yet he has managed to utter to his rescuers an apology for being the cause of his demise. The final words of our species, if we have fostered in ourselves a sense of grace from our defeats, will echo this whispered admission of regret. the hands of the stopwatch that workers pan for in the charred slag at the crash site of a capsule, the glass face of the timepiece blasted with grease and soot, will be frozen at the instant of impact. How can a species, content to remain the rabid cancer of its birth planet, hope to outlive even the overlooked crystalline growths that share its home, chthonic fauna that bloom unbidden and untended in their undiscovered catacombs, remaining hidden as they propagate until the radius of soul bloats, vaporizing their obsessive symmetries? We have been imprisoned in the mirrors we have cast. Our innards have been liquefied by the spiders we have engineered. The earthquakes of our making await us, the blackening of the sun by greenhouse fumes, the blood-red discoloration of the moon, the rain of stellar flak that splits the sky, the unrolling of history's final scroll, the collapse of all that we call strong. Who among us can stand against an indifferent universe? Would an encrypted letter cast into the void comfort us better than the act of writing it? A desperate yet effective consolation for the panic we must all deny, the byproduct of our insipid gift of sentience? Writing distracts us from the agonies of mortality with a labyrinth of virtual realities. The music of these dreams is the means by which we dive into our intuition, star-eaten in the deep repose of sleep. The final clang of a bell's black tongue on the roof of its rusted mouth. The auto-weaving pattern of spring frost on blocks of rotting masonry. The nuclear-powered eulogy of a long-dead species on an interstellar tour. The cavalcade of countless torments quarantined in the quarters of speech. The gardens of machines. The low chiming of light that clips the sky. And the candles that close out the night.